Vision? What do you know about my vision? My vision would turn your world upside down, tear asunder your illusions, and send the sanctuary of your own ignorance crashing down around you. Now ask yourself, are you really ready to see that vision?
Now tonight we've got a warning for anybody attempting or planning on launching a cyber attack against the U.S. Cyber attack. It's going to be seen as an act of war. The Pentagon has determined that a computer attack from another country could be met with a full U.S. military response. In other words, the U.S. might launch a few missiles in your direction if you screw with their computer systems. The Pentagon's working on a defense strategy for operating in cyberspace report that's expected to be released next month. And the report's going to help the military and the U.S. government understand how a major cyber attack could cause havoc across the country. So the report looks at several different scenarios, including cyber attacks on nuclear plants, subways, pipelines, and power grids. And according to the people who've seen this report, it says that the U.S. has every right to use traditional military force if a cyber attack happens. So the conclusion is based on the review of various treaties. And the U.S. top ally, the U.K., is said to also be on board with the same plan. But I've got a little concern with this strategy. How will the U.S. know for certain who is behind a cyber attack? Unlike traditional military attacks, a cyber attack can be routed through several different countries and computer systems, so it's difficult to find out the point of origin. So there's a chance that the U.S. could bomb a country after a cyber attack and then later have to say, oh, sorry, it wasn't you. Doesn't that sound eerily like starting a war in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction and then finding out they're not there? But you know what this really sounds like to me even more is it's just another push by the military-industrial complex to keep the U.S. engaged in never-ending military spending and fear-building. There's talk by President Obama of cutting defense, so defense contractors have to come up with a new strategy to keep that money coming. And if all else fails, just scare the daylights out of people. Last year, we told you about a cyber attack seminar held here in Washington by the Bipartisan Policy Center. And this was called Cyber Shockwave. And the seminar concluded that the U.S. government wasn't ready for a major cyber attack.
Clearly, our communications infrastructure is being attacked.
It starts with the college basketball March Madness application for cell phones. The supposed hacker uses it to gain access to all the information stored inside.
Up to 20 million and counting of the nation's cell phones have stopped working.
Now, that group said that they were conducting the seminar so they could advise the White House and the Pentagon about cybersecurity. And what do you know? Just a little bit over a year later, the Pentagon's going to release that defense strategy for operating in cyberspace report. So now that we've decided that we're willing to go to war over one of these nefarious attacks, as if 2 wars, 2 shadow wars, 1 fake humanitarian intervention, as if all of that isn't enough, undoubtedly, there are going to be billions more invested to protect ourselves. Hey, it's just the Pentagon doing the best the Pentagon does, scaring people, wasting money, and leading the American people into endless
war. You are
war.
headed to Asia, and you will be meeting with your Chinese counterpart in Singapore. You said that we face the possibility of a cyber attack. This is one of the things you talked about last time with me, about how this was a very big, serious issue of concern for you. And you said it could be the equivalent of Pearl Harbor. The Pentagon's acknowledged recently China is the biggest source of cyber attacks against this country, including stealing our military secrets. Newt Gingrich spoke about this threat on the campaign trail often. He said cyber attacks, cyber spying are, quote, acts of war. Do you agree? Are they acts of war? And how would the United States respond?
Well, there's no question that if a cyber attack, crippled our power grid in this country, took down our financial systems, took down our government systems, that would constitute an act of war. But what we're involved with here is the effort to make sure that never happens. And in order to do that, we've got to engage. I think it's important for us to engage China in this effort. That's one of the issues I raised when the Minister of Defense came here from China. How can we better engage on this issue to share information and to ensure that those kinds of attacks never happen? Because this is an area where the technology is developing quickly and where clearly it is becoming an adjunct in terms of any country that moves against another country militarily. This is something we've got to pay attention to. And it's not only with China. We've got to engage Russia. We've got to engage other countries in an effort to try to develop some kind of standards here that will assure us that, just as we did in the nuclear area, we can take steps to prevent a mistake that could be very damaging to our security.
China has been very aggressive in the South China Sea in the last few years. There have been some near skirmishes. How concerned are you, considering especially that we have treaties with the Philippines and Japan, that China's aggression could end up creating a situation where there might actually be a military involvement that we have to get involved in? How much does that concern you?
Well, you know, we want to make sure that we take all of the steps necessary to avoid those kinds of potential conflicts. And in order to do that, it's very important for us to develop a mill-to-mill relationship with China so that we can discuss these issues. I mean, when it comes to the South China Sea, the fact is that we have to protect our naval sea lanes. We've got to protect our maritime rights. We've got to recognize that there are international rules here that apply, that this is not an area that is controlled by any one country, that in order to conduct trade, in order to provide for peaceful exchanges, we have to be able to protect those rights. To do that, we've got to engage these countries. And so one of the reasons I'm going to China is to follow up on the President's efforts to try to establish a line of communications with them that deals with these kinds of issues. Because the last thing you want to avoid is a mistake by one country or another that decides that their only option is to use military force. If that happens, then I think we have a great concern about our ability to then maintain peace in that part of the world.
The director of the FBI really caught our attention today when he said that cyber attacks could soon be a bigger threat than terrorism. Bob Orr is our Homeland Security correspondent. Bob?
Scott, Director Robert Mueller said he spent his entire FBI career chasing terrorists and trying to stop the next terror attack. But today, in a stark warning to Congress, Mueller signaled the enemy and the mission may be changing.
I do believe that the cyber threat will equal or surpass the threat from counterterrorism in the foreseeable future.
House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers was even more blunt.
A cyber attack is on its way. We will suffer a catastrophic cyber attack. The clock is ticking.
Officials say they have no information that any large-scale attack is imminent, but concede critical systems, like the nation's power grid and air traffic control network, are vulnerable. U.S. businesses and government computer networks are already under daily assault. State-sponsored spies, largely from Russia and China, are stealing corporate secrets in what one official calls the greatest pillaging of wealth in history.
Our intelligence correspondent Suzanne Kelly is live in Washington right now. So, Suzanne, how bad is this? What are we talking about exactly?
Pretty bad, I tell you, Fred. Those numbers have gone up sharply over the years. Now, remember, this is the number of reported attacks against companies that control things like the power grid, the water filtration plants, even nuclear facilities. The Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Division reports that reported attacks against all of them up significantly since 2009. Take a look at these numbers. In 2009, there were 9 attacks reported to DHS. In 2010, 41 reported attacks. And just last year, the number soared to 198 reports. Now, that doesn't mean that every attack was reported or that everyone was successful. In some cases, it was determined that there was no threat.
Just an hour ago, we had an attack. We learned from the NYSC that they've had some kind of denial of service attack on their website. Over the weekend, a former Goldman Sachs computer programmer accused of stealing proprietary trading code in a heist that could cost the bank millions of dollars. And then dozens of government websites, including the White House and the Treasury Department, shut down in a cyber attack that may have been engineered by North Korea. That same attack targeting both the NYSC and the NASDAQ that we were just telling you about. Just how vulnerable are we? What can we do about it? Howard Schmidt is former cybersecurity advisor to President Bush, as well as to eBay and Microsoft. He's now president and CEO of Information Security Forum. Roger Cressy, also formerly at the White House, is now NBC security analyst and president of Good Harbor Consulting. Howard, let me start with you. How serious is this situation when we hear all of these sites being attacked?
Well, this is serious because what this has done is escalated something we see taking place on a day-to-day basis. You know, most sites can withstand the denial of service attacks that they normally take. But to be able to have it to be such a magnitude and affect these major sites, that's a major escalation of the attacks against systems.
Roger, it was about a month ago the president announced he was going to appoint a cyber security czar. Maybe they had wind of it at that time. Realistically, what could the government do to try and prevent these attacks?
Well, the short answer is not much, because as Howard said, government networks are constantly under the threat of attack. Botnets are attacking on a daily basis. The real issue is what is the resiliency of the networks and whether any critical functions were compromised. So if the Department of Transportation's website is taken down, that's unfortunate. But if the FAA and the Air Traffic Control Network is being targeted, that's far more serious. So what we're seeing right now is predominantly nuisance at the government level, but that doesn't mean the threat is not serious.
I was going to say, Howard, if they can do this to websites, can they take that next step that Roger's talking about and really start to affect the major executions that they have to complete?
Well, that's always a possibility, but it's very, very difficult in these set of circumstances, because as we do a better job about hardening the systems themselves, protecting them against people breaking into them, what happens is the bad guys fall back and say, okay, we can't break in, so what we'll do is we'll deny access to it and create a major traffic jam just so you can't use those services.
Are they just toying with us right now, Roger, just to let us know that they're there and they could do more damage? I mean, is that what's going on here? Right now we're just calling this a nuisance.
Right. Well, the big question is, who is it? And if it's a state being involved here, then certainly that's far more significant. If it's a group of individuals, even individuals are sophisticated enough to put together these type of botnets to drop access to websites, that is problematic. But what you really worry about are state-level actors at this point. We don't know who it is.
We should point out that the analysts in South Korea and the South Korean government was also hit in this attack. Their analysis seems to suggest that it is people either connected with the North Korean government or people in the North Korean government right now.
Right. We've seen the reports from South Korean intelligence that it's a potential North Korean sympathizers, which always strikes me as a bit of an oxymoron. Right. But until we get confirmation from our government that there might have been someone like the North Koreans or someone similar involved, we only got one source of data here. I think the bigger issue, as Howard said, is how do we harden our systems and ensure whoever does attack them ultimately fails in those attacks.
A cyber attack is on its way. We will suffer a catastrophic cyber attack. The clock is ticking. A cyber attack is on its way. A cyber attack is on its way. A cyber attack is on its way.